Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for the Capital Extension virtual call-in session. I'm Jessica, the Community Relations Coordinator for the project. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few things. All participants have been muted to avoid background noise. Following the presentation, we will take comments and questions online and by phone. We will provide instructions when we get to that portion of the meeting. To turn on closed captioning, select that option from the WebEx menu. If you're having any technical issues, you may need to log off and reconnect. Or if you're on a phone, hang up and redial. If you continue to experience problems, please contact WebEx support at 866-229-3239. The format for tonight is a short presentation, followed by a question and answer session. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. We will be translating today's broadcast simultaneously via our Spanish language channel. If you need to join the Spanish language channel, please use your phone to dial in to the Spanish language line and mute this presentation to hear it in Spanish. Joining me is Maria, who is providing Spanish interpretation for us. Maria?
Buenas noches, mi nombre es María, yo voy a ser su intérprete. Para utilizar el canal de audio en español, utilice el enlace para acompañarnos, que sería 1-408-418-9388, y nos puede acompañar o por teléfono al 2482-054-6582. La contraseña del seminario web es Capitol Extensión. El número por teléfono es 227-48653.
Thank you, Maria. Now I'd like to introduce the CapEx project manager, Joshua Matthews. Josh?
Thank you, Jessica. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. As Jessica mentioned, my name is Joshua Matthews, and I am the project manager for the Capital Extension, and will be presenting to you today. Please bear with me. I will be speaking slowly to assist Maria in the Spanish translation. So today we are talking about the Capital Extension, which is a proposed light rail project that you see here before you, the green line and the green dots. As you can see in downtown Phoenix, we have our existing light rail line, as well as the South Central Extension, which is that dashed gold line. The Capital Extension would be extending from 3rd Avenue in Washington in downtown Phoenix, heading west along Washington until Washington becomes Adams, and looping around via 19th Avenue and returning to downtown Phoenix via Jefferson. As you can see on the green dots, there are 3 proposed stations or 6 separate paired platforms. The first station moving from downtown Phoenix would be at 7th Avenue, Washington and Jefferson. The next station would be at approximately 13th Avenue, Washington and Jefferson. And the next station would be at the State Capitol, approximately 17th Avenue, Adams and Jefferson. At the end of this presentation, we will have a question and answer session. I'm joined today by some of our team members who will assist in answering any of those questions. We also have from the City of Phoenix, Marcus Coleman, who will help assist any questions as well. Next slide, Jessica. The capital extension, the line that you saw on the map in the previous slide, has been approved by all three entities that are required to approve a light rail project. Phoenix City Council and Valley Metro's Board of Directors approved the line on the map that you saw in November of 2021. And then earlier this year, MAGS, which is the Maricopa Association of Governments, Regional Council approved the project in January of this year. Next slide. From a funding perspective, we're expecting that this project is going to be funded by about 50% federal dollars. The remaining portion would be funded through a combination of local Phoenix Transportation 2050 sales tax dollars, as well as regional public transportation fund dollars. The public transportation fund is a part of Proposition 400, and the capital extension is fully funded through that existing program. The federal funding that we're expecting is primarily through the Capital Investment Grant Program. This is a competitive grant program that the Federal Transit Administration offers each year to help fund major high-capacity transit projects. Next slide. From a schedule perspective, we are looking to deliver this project in late 2027, possibly pushing into early 2028. The typical process that we follow and where we're at today is in preliminary engineering, and that's what you see on the left. I'll touch on those a little bit later. However, we're going to be moving into what's called an environmental assessment. And then the typical development process, we go into final design, then into construction, then into testing and certification, and then ultimately we open the project for revenue service. Throughout the length of this development process, there is community and stakeholder engagement throughout that increases as we get closer to construction. Next slide. Next slide. So I mentioned that today we are in preliminary engineering. Our milestone deliverable that we are providing for review is the 15% design. And on that 15% design are the basic components of the light rail project. So that includes where the light rail tracks are going to be located, where the light rail stations are going to be located, what the roadway and how the road is going to be striped is going to look like, and then the location of the sidewalks. As we show this 15% design, we solicit feedback on those items. That's what we're doing today. We will continue to refine those items, work to add more detail. And in addition, we will add on some additional items that are ancillary to the project. That includes landscaping, traffic signals, property, right-of-way, utilities, systems, and drainage. After we've completed that deliverable, we then will be coming back to the public to share those additional details and solicit additional feedback. Next slide. Our next step, which we are looking to start here this summer, is called an environmental assessment. Now, environmental assessment is required through what's called the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. This requirement comes from the fact that we are soliciting federal funding for this project. as you see under this umbrella, as part of the environmental assessment, we will be looking at all of these different criteria to see if there are any impacts that the capital extension may cause in these specific areas. And if there are any impacts, we then work to mitigate those impacts with the goal of ultimately getting clearance from the Federal Transit Administration that our project has no significant impacts to the community or the environment. Next slide. So that process is typically lasts about 12 months. It typically starts with a public meeting, and this is the public process we're going through right now. And then Valley Metro would begin to prepare the environmental document. After that document has been prepared, it's provided to stakeholders and the public to solicit comments on the key takeaways of the document. After those comments have been solicited and incorporated, Valley Metro would prepare that final document for one last review period by all interested parties. And then ultimately, the Federal Transit Administration, or FTA, would issue a decision document allowing us to proceed with the light rail extension. Next slide. Light rail construction, as many have seen over the last 15 years in our region, can look very different from project to project, from site to site, and from day to day. However, we have a fairly typical process that I wanted to go over. And this process, depending on the project, depending on the challenges of the project, usually lasts anywhere from 3 to 4 years. Based on the length of this project, we're looking at closer to 3 years. The first step in light rail construction typically involves what's called underground utility relocation. Because we cannot have existing utilities located under the light rail tracks, we first have to go and relocate them to different locations underneath the street. This is typically the most impactful part of construction because the street is being torn up and utilities are being relocated. Once we get up and out of the ground, that's when the light rail facilities start to be constructed. That includes laying the track, rebuilding the street, if necessary, constructing new sidewalks, installing new landscaping and signage, and then building up and out of the ground. And that includes the station platforms and what we call the overhead electrification system, which is the wires and poles that provide power to the light rail vehicles. After we have substantially completed construction of the project, we then go through a rigorous testing certification plan, and then and only then will we begin operating the project. Next slide. Talk about public art. So Valley Metro, over the last 15 years, has strived to incorporate public art into many, if not most, of the light rail facilities you see today. And that holds true for the capital extension. I'll touch on the next slide what facilities we're looking at for public art. But one of the important areas where people can take part in this process is called the Stakeholder Art Review Committee, or SARC for short. This committee will look at the public art submissions, work with the public artists to find area appropriate public art for this corridor. It is an application process, and this application process opens up June 13th and runs until July 21st. If you attended the live in-person public meeting last week, these dates have been changed and have been updated. There will be various panels that will work on each area of the project. If you want additional information, you can go to valleymetro.org/artsline. Next slide. So as I mentioned in our focus to incorporate public art, for this project, we have 6 station platforms. We expect that unique public art will be incorporated into the design of each one of those platforms. In addition, we have what are called traction power substations. These are generally a small building that incorporates the electronics that provide the electricity to the overhead electrification system. We are expecting to have public art incorporated into both of the traction power substations that will be built for this project. Selected artists for the Capitol Extension will create thoughtful, engaging artwork that reflects the character of the surrounding community by coordinating with area residents and stakeholders. Valley Metro is going to issue a call to artists. This date as well has been updated. We are expecting it to open on June 30th of this year. Submittals from public artists will be due August 23rd again of this year. Next slide. Talking about next steps, go to the next slide. So as I mentioned this summer, we're going to be focusing on bringing in and incorporating our public artists in our review panels. We're going to incorporate feedback we've received from this public engagement series and continue to work on our next milestone design, which is our 30% design. We expect that public engagement to begin in the fall of this year. And beginning this year and ending in early 2024, we are again expecting to draft that environmental assessment, which will include additional public engagement. Throughout this process, we will continue to refine the project design, as well as incorporate feedback and engage with our stakeholders in the corridor. Next slide. I will end by thanking you for your time today. I know that everyone's time is valuable, especially in the evening. We appreciate the engagement. And I'll hand it off to Jessica now to talk about how we can solicit some of your feedback today or answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. We will now begin a question and answer portion of tonight's meeting. You may ask a question a few different ways. To verbally make a statement or to ask a question, we ask that you please virtually raise your hand. Here's how to do that. For those of you using WebEx through your internet browser, mobile phone app, or your WebEx desktop app, follow the instructions on the screen. To ask a question or make a statement, click the raised hand icon. When you're finished, the moderator will mute your line and we will ask you to lower your hand by clicking on the raised hand icon again. Again, for those joining us online, these WebEx instructions are now showing on your screen. If you're joining by phone as a call-in participant, press *3. This gives us a hand-raised signal, and when it's your turn to speak, we'll call on you and ask you to unmute your line. Press *6 to unmute, and then you may begin speaking. When you finish speaking, press *3 again to remove the hand-raised signal. If you've joined us by a WebEx application, You can also submit your question or comment in writing using the WebEx Q&A feature. These instructions are displayed on the screen. And as a reminder, if you're having a technical issue, please contact WebEx Help at 866-229-3239. We'll do our best to respond to questions in the order that they're received. I do see that we have a call-in user who has raised their hand, so let me go ahead and unmute you. Call-in user, you're now live.
Hello. Yes, I look at, I have it in my hand here, the map, the route map, and I look at 15th Avenue and I look at 19th Avenue, and if we're being multimodal and working on congestion and such, you'd think that they would have a stop there. And this has been brought to the attention at the board almost a year ago. So when I see the document that you put forth and it shows that you don't have any connectivity with 15th Avenue or 19th Avenue, is your answer, well, you're waiting for the public to figure this out for you because you didn't know how to present something in a correct and right way to start with?
Jessica, I will take that. Thank you, sir, for your comment. Appreciate it. From what I heard, you're asking about connectivity between the light rail stations and the existing local bus routes. So I'll talk about 15th Avenue first. So our station platform at 15th Avenue, the western exit of that station platform, is approximately 500 feet from the bus stop along 15th Avenue. That's about 1/10 of a mile, which is typically well within walking distance and connectivity between light rail and bus. It's not shown on this map, but we have a turnaround track that's located on Cudahy Way, which is at 14th Avenue alignment. Because of that turnaround track, we are not able to move that station platform any closer to 15th Avenue. Although, as I noted, 500 feet is typically well within a walking distance for a connection between bus and light rail. The 19th Avenue station that you mentioned, or 19th Avenue area, is definitely more challenging. We understand that the existing Route 19 runs in a north-south direction on 19th Avenue today, and our station platforms are located at 17th Avenue. So that distance is definitely longer. It's about a 1/4 mile, which is typically right on the edge of what someone will walk from a typical walk shed or walk distance. We looked at and analyzed the feasibility of putting station platforms between 16th and 17th Avenue, between 17th and 18th Avenue, between 18th and 19th Avenue, as well as putting a station directly on 19th Avenue. I'll talk about first the station on 19th Avenue. There's a number of challenges from technical perspective as well as property. We have BNSF Railway on one side of 19th Avenue. We have the state capitol on the other side, and there is just not enough room to fit a station platform in there. It would also cause us to have to close down the primary access off of Washington Street East into the state capitol. And when the future 10 West extension opens up, that station platform, if there was one on 19th Avenue, would no longer be served by westbound light rail traffic. It would only be served by eastbound light rail traffic. I mentioned the 10 West extension. It's not shown on here, but the first proposed station for the 10 West extension is located just west of 19th Avenue. We expect that that will provide that local connection for the local bus routes and light rail. From a political perspective, we do acknowledge that we are adjacent to a number of sensitive properties within the state capitol, sensitive buildings that host important government operations. We are considerate of the fact that the whole state capitol mall area, from a regulatory perspective, is controlled by the state government. So in working with them in citing our station locations, there were political challenges between 17th and 18th Avenue, and there was technical and political challenges between 18th and 19th Avenue. The stations located between 16th and 17th provide direct access to Wesley Boland Plaza and the state capitol area, including Supreme Court and surrounding state properties. And so bringing all of the input together from our stakeholders and from our desire to provide good service to the state capitol area, these station platforms work the best for the project.
I have a question from Heather in the Q&A. Just a reminder, everyone, if you have a question and you want to write it out, please put it in the Q&A panel on your web controls. Heather asks, can you speak about the connectivity between trains? For example, if someone is traveling from Mesa to the Capitol, would they transfer to another train in order to get to the Capitol?
Thank you, Heather. That is a great question. So stepping back from the Capitol extension, today, Valley Metro has two projects that are under construction. The first one is the Northwest Extension Phase 2, going out to the old Metro Center area. When that project opens, it will just extend our existing single line by 1.5 miles to Metro Center. If you can picture the light rail line today, it kind of makes a big L across the region, going from North Phoenix into downtown Phoenix, and then heading east past the airport through downtown Tempe and into downtown Mesa. When the South Central extension opens, that will change. So instead of a single line, we will have two light rail lines, two separate lines that will operate independent of each other and will interface in downtown Phoenix. We will have a north-south line that will run from the end of line at Metro Center all the way south to Baseline. And then we'll have an east-west line that will go from Gilbert Road and Main Street, the end of line today, to what you see here at 3rd Avenue, looping around. The idea is that as the Capitol extension is built and then the I-10 West extension is built, that east-west line will continue to extend, basically building a big T of light rail across the region with a north-south spine and an east-west spine. And so in the future, you will be able to go from Mesa into the state capitol. If you wanted to go from Mesa to North Central Phoenix, you would transfer at the downtown hub station, which is going to be a transfer station that pretty much surrounds the cityscape development around Central, 1st Avenue, Washington, and Jefferson. And Jessica, I can read the chat, so if you want me to just go into the next question, I'm happy to do that.
Sounds good.
So the next question is from Mary. Mary asked, if construction takes about 3 years, what efforts will be made to mitigate the traffic impact in the Government Mall area? I appreciate the question, Mary. We don't gloss over it. Light rail construction is definitely impactful to the street. It's impactful to surrounding properties. We work very hard with the property owners, as well as the tenants and clients that go to these areas during construction to make sure that access is always maintained. It's a requirement of our contractor to work with property owners and their tenants to make sure that that access is maintained for their normal business hours. During construction, as I mentioned on that construction slide, usually that first year is the most impactful part of construction. And that's where you'll see the most traffic changes, temporary closures or lane closures, those type of things. Again, we'll work very hard with the state, with Maricopa County, with the city of Phoenix, and with all of the stakeholders and property owners in this area to make sure that traffic flows as best as it can. Some ways that we end up doing this is we'll move traffic to other streets during certain times. So maybe providing access off of Madison or Monroe or Adams, those type of things to help maintain those access to properties.
All right, I have a question coming in from Q&A. Sarah would like to know, can you talk more about light rail opportunities, or light rail art opportunities, and how we can give our input?
I may phone a friend and hand that off to you, Jessica, or Terry. Maybe you can speak a little bit more to the public art component, if you don't mind.
Of course. I'll pull up the artist selection again, slides again, because these applications are going to be opening pretty soon. And I think it's crucial that we get people who are around working and living in this area to apply for the Stakeholder Art Review Committee. That application is going to open June 13th through July 21st. Now, this goes into the art that will be at the 3 split stations throughout this new extension. So they'll be taking people to kind of like look at the art applications, or I'm sorry, the artist applications that will be coming in for these opportunities, and selecting artists that really represent the spirit of the area and are working with the neighborhoods and communities kind of in that are there every day. So you can see there are a couple of different opportunities as well for artists. So if you are an artist, or if you have an artist that you know that you feel like should be included in this process, encourage them to apply when the call to artists open on June 30th. We're looking especially for artwork that will kind of, again, represent the spirit of the neighborhoods and the character of the surrounding community. And that, we're looking for established artists and also emerging artists for our traction power substations.
I would just add that if you're not interested or able to participate in the SARC, there are general community opportunities throughout the art development process. Some of those are initiated by the selected artists themselves, and some of them are more general public opportunities facilitated through Valley Metro. So I think the best bet is to make sure that that Jessica has your contact information, so she can make sure that our art team has that and can include you on their distribution list, and so you're aware of those opportunities. They'll also be posted on the website for the project.
Yeah. Another question coming from the Q&A from Greg. Can you speak to how light rail will run down Washington and Jefferson Street, Josh?
Sure. So if you're familiar with light rail east of downtown Phoenix, it's going to look fairly similar. By that, I mean that the light rail is going to run primarily in the center of the street, with a local access road on one side and a couple through travel lanes on the other side. This is typically called center running. The opposite to that would be side running. The primary side running portion of the project right now is on Adams, where it moved to the north curb. Operationally, again, it's going to run east and west. So if you are heading in a westbound direction, you're going to be getting on Washington until the train loops around on 19th Avenue, heading back east on Jefferson. Right now, we don't expect that, because this project is a loop, we would expect that passengers would be able to ride that loop around between the stations, between that 19th Avenue loop.
All right. I do have, again, call-in user number 3. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you here if you have another question. Call-in user number 3, you're live.
All right. So the reason that we don't have stops at 15th and 19th is because we're running the rail in the middle of the road, because that's the most convenient for the rail, correct? And I'm looking at it and going, well, they said 500 feet. If I'm in a wheelchair or disabled, that 500 feet is something to deal with. I note that at 7th Avenue, you do have the stops so that they are within the realm. And the one on 19th, you're saying that, well, with the extension, how are you dealing with the extension when there's a member of the legislature who has a lot of power on what this new extension of the tax is supposed to be, and he's supporting rail not at all. So when you're doing your planning right now, how come you're planning for something that may not exist? And when it comes to the stop on 19th Avenue, you're right, the state capitol is there. So that parking lot, working with the state, wouldn't it be something to have the stop right there so that their employees at the Capitol and at ADOT have a stop closer to them, being that right now you're saying, well, if you're a Capitol employee, you can go to the front of it, and that connects with, oh, that only connects with the rail. So I'm wondering, one, why you are not making sure that we're doing air quality to the maximum, which means that when there's a bus route that crosses the rail, that there is connectivity, and 2 blocks is not connectivity and 500 feet is not connectivity. And is the reason for this because you guys are putting the rail in the middle of the street rather than on the side to where stops can be anywhere along the side? That's the way it is in the central city already.
Crawley, this is Marcus Coleman. I'm light rail administrator at the City of Phoenix. The stops that you see here are stops that, as Josh explained earlier, we looked at from an operational standpoint and some information that we had received back from the state as going through the process. And I shouldn't say this necessarily the state, but stakeholders along the alignment. The reason that we're showing this information at a 15% design and the importance of this is to get comments like your comment. Comments to show that, we really need to make sure that we have a focus on connectivity with the bus route on 15th Avenue and 19th Avenue. We will look at that and look at, the possibilities of adjusting station locations to create connectivity throughout the corridor. We also know that, we have BNSF Railroad on 19th Avenue, as well as the state, and you have security measures and railroad that has separation requirements and limited right of way, and there are several factors there. That doesn't mean that we can't look at these items. So it's really good that you're bringing these things to light as far as that need for that. And so we'll definitely look into it and be prepared to address that as we move forward.
Thank you, Marcus. I think I'll just add one specific question that I heard was about the location of the guideway being in the center of the street, and does that play into station location? Generally speaking, that does not. We can locate stations in the center of the street or on the side of the street, more or less. It's more of what Marcus had mentioned about the conditions around the stations that we have to take into account for.
Mary has another question in the chat, which is, has Arizona/Maricopa County already received the capital investment grant funds?
Thank you, Mary. So from the capital investment grant program, the state of Arizona and Maricopa County do not play a part in receiving that grant. So the city of Phoenix and Valley Metro as the federal grantee and the project sponsor would be the receiver of those funds. This process is a multi-year competitive grant process. So we just entered just a month ago what's called the project development phase, which usually lasts about 2 years. After that, you move into the engineering phase, which can last anywhere from a year to 2. And then at the end of that, you get into what's called a full funding grant agreement. And that's when those funds have been confirmed by the federal government and begin to be allocated to the project. So we enter into this process and we work hand in hand, as we have with almost every single one of the projects we have built in this region has been federally funded through this program, almost every one of them. We work hand in hand with the Federal Transit Administration to work through this program, to provide all the necessary documentations, to continue the project design to an acceptable level. And then we would go through an assessment process where we'd ultimately get recommended into the president's budget for funding.
I see another question in the Q&A. Nicole is asking, how long will construction take, and will any of the streets be closed during construction?
So construction is typically anywhere from a 3 to 4 year process. For this project, we're expecting much closer to the 3-year side of things. We generally don't see long-term street closures on a scale of no cars being able to go into one street for a long period of time. What we will see is traffic control measures, temporary street closures, alternate routes, those type of things, depending on the level of construction, the type of construction, and what's going on in the street. Obviously, putting light rail in the middle of the street, that's going to change how people can access certain properties during construction. However, as I mentioned, one of our requirements that we put on our contractor is to maintain access to properties generally all the time. We also have a strong community relations team that will engage with each one of those property owners throughout construction. So if something does come up that is unknown, unaware, something that they're not expecting, they can reach out directly to Valley Metro and we can resolve that quickly. I hope that answers that question.
Just a reminder, we have a chat open and a Q&A. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and throw them in the Q&A. So we're happy to get to them tonight. Mary is asking, how will construction impact bus routes?
It's a great question, Mary. So right now, today, there are 3 different types of bus routes that go in this corridor. First is what's called a local circulator. That is the DASH, or the Downtown Area Shuttle. We also, as was mentioned by a previous member of the public, we have a number of local bus routes. We have Route 8 that goes down 7th Avenue, Route 15 on 15th Avenue, Route 19 on 19th Avenue. Just north of the corridor, we have Route 3 on Van Buren as well. And then lastly, and very significantly, almost, if not every local or every express or rapid route goes through this corridor as it goes into or out of downtown Phoenix. So of all 3 of those routes, right now, Valley Metro and City of Phoenix are not making any changes or proposing any changes to the local bus routes or the express bus routes. Separately from this process, separately from this project, the City of Phoenix just over the last few months has done a public process to start soliciting feedback on the DASH. So if Marcus, if you want to touch on that at all in any way, you're welcome to, but I'll just say that is a separate process outside of the capital extension. So I don't know, Marcus, if you wanted to touch on that one real quick, or if not.
I didn't want to touch on it, but since you tossed it to me twice, I guess I have to speak to it. Our public transit department is looking at the DASH right now. Actually, they finished looking at the DASH. They're looking at how the current route of the DASH is right now. The western leg of the DASH was not the focus of this survey. It was more the eastern side portion of it. Really trying to see how they can service more of the eastern portion of downtown and then also around the Grand Avenue area. Really seeing how we could get our DASH to service that. And so they're taking those results right now, running through some route options, and hopefully they'll have some proposals for service changes coming up, I think, with October. They'll be looking at some potential service changes for that service.
Thank you, Marcus. And as Marcus noted, with the service changes, it's not to say that after the construction of this project that there may be bus route changes, and that would be a separate public process that we have twice a year through our bus service changes.
So I have one last question in the Q&A. So this will be our last question unless you have additional questions. Please feel free to put them in the chat or into the Q&A here. Oh, I do see, okay, raised hand over for call-in user 3. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute Blue, and then we'll do our last question.
All right. Yeah, I'm looking at what we got for what was it? They charged us $13 million for the rail design and $600,000 for the bus part of that. Is it going to cost them more when I believe that the board is going to make sure that 15th and 19th Avenue have their stops? Is it going to cost us more from the people we've already spent $13 million to get it done right, as in with the bus stops and the rail connectivity?
So I'll answer that in a very general way to say that yes, if there is any additional design work that that we would have to pay for that design work. Marcus, do you want to add anything?
No, I think that's kind of misleading the way that Josh answered that. With the 15% design, even though we're showing station locations for, and that's really why we're showing those station locations, is for community feedback and reaction to that. As part of us moving to a 30% design and bringing on a final designer, finalizing station design locations, those are part of the scope of work. So when we're looking at that scope, that's included in that scope of work. So it's not, that scope isn't handed over with a, this is the final location at a 15% design of the stations. Once we get closer to a 30% design, we're a little bit more fixed in where we will have those items. So as to say, will there be more cost? Yes, there's more cost because there's more time, but that time is already accounted for. So that task and that level of scope of work is already accounted for in that solicitation, and also in our work that we're doing to move forward from a 15% design to a 30% design. So it's not like this is going to cost us a dramatic amount of money more. We just had to have something that the community could respond to. And so now we'll take these comments back and we'll refine them as we had planned to. So I hope that helps you, Blue. Mr.
Thanks.
Crawley, sorry about that.
Thanks for that clarification, Marcus.
No problem.
All right, my last two questions, unless anybody has anything additional to add to the chat or the Q&A. When will the Northwest 2 and the South Central extension be completed? I don't know if this one will, Josh, you know this one.
I'm sure there's
I can
someone on
speak to
this
it.
call that can, I was saying, I'm sure there's someone that can answer it more definitively. Take it away, Marcus.
No problem. So for the Northwest Extension Phase 2, we are still on track for opening of that extension into revenue service January 28th of 2024. For the South Central project, due to some situations with soil conditions, archaeological findings, as well as material lead times and some labor shortages. We are pushing some on that project, so we're looking at mid-2025, mid-calendar year of 2025 to be into revenue service date. That doesn't mean that we'll have active construction happening until that date. That's just when we'll hit into our revenue service date, is that mid-calendar year. So we're hopeful to have most of the utility relocation work completed by the end of this calendar year, moving into end of this calendar year, early next calendar year, moving into the guideway work. And so that work will continue. So I hope that answers that question.
Thanks, Marcus.
No problem.
Lastly, just a final reminder, the valleymetro.org/CapEx has our comment form if you want to submit your comment through May 31st. You can also update your contact information and get future project updates. Now, Brittany has our final question, and I'm going to go ahead and send this right over to Josh, since it's just part of my close anyway. Will this recording be posted on the Valley Metro website, Josh?
Yes, it will be.
Perfect.
That was the right answer.
It was, yes. valleymetro.org/CapEx will have that presentation recorded and posted to the website. But we also have another opportunity for live discussion tomorrow at noon. there is an additional virtual call-in session. So if you if you or someone you know missed part of this presentation or the full presentation, please encourage them to attend. We will have that available and be answering questions again. Thank you all so very much for your interest in this project and for your participation tonight. We appreciate everyone who joined today. Thank you and have a great evening.